Welcome, everybody, to the first of many 2021 college football previews. We're talking the Heisman Trophy today. I am Ben Rasa. That is Matt Gajewski. You better get used to this pairing because we are going to be doing a ton of college football stuff, not just during the season, but leading up. This is the first of many videos, so we're super excited to dive into it. Last year, Matt, as you know, it was kind of a wonky college football schedule. I'm glad we got something, but it didn't feel real. Are you excited to get the full season in this year?
Yeah, I am. I'm glad the Big Ten and Pac-12 are going to be playing full seasons. It did affect a lot of my Heisman futures. I was telling you before the show, I was trying to get Keaton Slovis 100-1, but that limited Pac-12 season really hurt a lot of the Heisman futures. So I don't think a lot of players were live that should have been. But we get a full season this year, and I am really excited for it.
We absolutely do. And like I said, we're going to be breaking down conferences and teams and players and DFS and betting. We've got you guys covered. Hit that like button, show the support. And if there's any topics that you want leading up to the season, you know our handles. Follow us on Twitter and let us know because we are keen to do content. But the way we're going to do this today, we've got 3 picks each. We're not just going to go to the top of the board. We're going to give you one favorite, one mid-range, and then kind of one long shot, some guys with some longer odds. So since you are our college football expert, I'm going to show the respect and allow you to go first. Take it away.
With the first pick, I'm going to go Spencer Rattler, quarterback from Oklahoma. He's not only the favorite to win this award, but when you look at just who wins the Heisman, there's really 3 major characteristics. Usually they play quarterback. Usually they play for winning teams and not just like a winning record above 500 team. These quarterbacks usually have 2 losses, fewer. Most of the time they're in the playoff, winning national championships or in very good bowl games. And then they play in Power 5 conferences. So Rattler checks all those boxes. And then it helps if you have a quarterback who is a dual threat. Rattler's not your traditional dual threat. He plays for Oklahoma, so he's not going to be like your Kyler Murray, but he does have some rushing upside here. And even though he's 8-1, which is pretty steep odds to be paying for a quarterback in the Heisman market, I still think he's the best bet on the board. Been widely mocked as the number 1 pick, at least in the 2020 draft, the early mocks you'll see. And this Oklahoma team is loaded. They return almost their entire starting offensive line. And the players they're replacing, they have some premier transfers coming in, like Wanya Morris coming in from Tennessee, Robert Congo coming over from Arizona, and then they have a bunch of elite receivers. So I think Spencer Rattler still should be the favorite to win this award.
Yeah, I mean, Lincoln Riley, he produces them. What's there to say? Oklahoma's prolific, the Big 12, we know the scoring. I have no problem with that. The one thing I like, though, you mentioned the criteria. My first pick, he checks all the boxes as well. I'm going to Bama, to Bryce Young, their new quarterback, 11-1. Everything you mentioned about Rattler, I think you can pretty much say for him. Now, we don't have a body of work like we've seen with Rattler, but Bryce Young steps into, probably the best situation you can have just because it's Alabama. He's going to get the opportunities. They start with a showcase game against Miami. They play in the SEC. If they march through to the playoff, he's going to be in contention almost by default. And yes, they've lost a ton, but Bama loses a ton every year. They still are going to have a very good offensive line. He's got Mechie. He's got other weapons. And he can move a little. Again, I'm not sure exactly what to expect from him, but like everyone from Alabama, he's extremely highly touted. All the things that you want. Got minor dust-up work last year, but he should be ready to roll. So now with college football, it's not unheard of by any stretch to see a guy just slide in and immediately compete for the Heisman. We've seen it time and time again. Before we get to your next pick, though, there is one other player towards the top of the board that I wanted to ask you about. And it's Clemson's QB. He's got the outrageous last name. We saw him last year against Notre Dame. Where do you have him ranked in terms? I know you like Rattler the best. Do you have him with someone like Bryce Young, or do you have him more in that next tier?
I think he's a slight cut above Bryce Young. And it's because we've seen a little bit of it. He's not built like Bryce Young. He's going to be like your big 6'5", 250-pound quarterback who has a little bit of rushing upside. It's not going to be similar to Bryce Young, who seems very much to be more in that Kyler Murray mold. He's built more like Kyler Murray himself. But the thing I like most about Uiagalelei is the fact that he's shown a little bit. He passed for over 300 yards in both his starts. He's Justin Ross coming back after he missed last year with a neck injury. And Clemson's schedule is just brutally easy. They get Georgia in week 1, which is by far and away their toughest game of the year. But after that, They dodge Miami. They dodge North Carolina. They're not going to see either of those teams until the conference title game. They have a very real chance of going undefeated, and if they can get past Georgia, I think they do that. So Power 5, quarterback with a very good winning record. He checks all those boxes.
It's just his name that could be a problem. That is quite a name. I'm going to struggle with that all year. I got to come up with a nickname for this guy, but that's neither here nor there. All right, your second pick, mid-range target. Where are you going?
So once you get to the mid-range, I think you're trying to find these quarterbacks that could ascend. So think of your Joe Burrows. Kyler Murray's even another example of somebody who could ascend. And somebody I like this year is Ole Miss Matt Corral. So he checks all the boxes we talk about. Power 5. He's a quarterback. He has good rushing upside. The one question I have with Matt Corral is how good is this Ole Miss offense going to be? When we have quarterbacks that don't necessarily check the national championship winning caliber box, they need to be prolific. So Lamar Jackson was an example of this with Louisville. I don't think Corral is going to rush for that kind of season, but he has Lane Kiffin as this offensive coordinator, who very much is one of the premier play callers in the SEC and the country. They have some good weapons coming back at wide receiver. This is an offense I think that should take a step forward with Lane Kiffin. And I think if you're just looking for an underdog or mid-range play at the quarterback position who could take a potential leap and go for this Heisman, Matt Corral fits the bill.
Don't mind it. Yeah, again, he showed flashes that when Bama could not stop them last year. They've got the power. I just don't, as you mentioned, their big thing is how many games can a team like that win.
They're projected for 7.5, which really surprised me because this is a team that was barely bowl eligible last year. So books are projecting a step forward. They dodged Georgia and Florida. So I mean, that's all pretty good for them.
Yeah, but man, that's interesting. That is more than I would have thought if you told me guess the over under. Well, that's one to keep an eye on. And what is 20-1? Did you say?
Yep.
20-1. Okay. My second guy. It's similar, of course, because we're following this kind of blueprint. He's 30-1, but I kind of want to talk through this because I don't know exactly how he gets it done. We're going to the Pac-12. We're going to Keaton Slovis, the USC quarterback. This is a guy that showed talent. He's got, I think, a ton of NFL pedigree. It's just a situation. He's not nearly as mobile as some of the guys we've talked about. His minor, shortened season, he had flashes of brilliance and flashes of just not great play. I do think he's got the talent. He's got some receivers back, certainly Drake London, McCoy, some of these other guys. I think the opportunity is there. But I guess I want to ask you, I love the number at 30-1. I love the talent of him. Do you think that this is directly correlated that USC is going to have to make a deep run and be maybe in the playoff conversation? Or is someone like Slovis able to compile enough, even if USC racks up a handful of losses?
I think they probably need to win the Pac-12. I think a playoff berth would be fantastic for them. And I think if they had something like a one-loss season, they could very much do that. With Slovis, there's a ton to like. I think he's mostly been up in his career. If you look at like adjusted completion percentage, he was top 5 even last year. And it's really hard to determine how much of that was small sample with Slovis, but back in 2019, a very efficient season for him as well. I think USC has a really strong chance of winning the Pac-12. If you just look at their schedule, they're going to play Notre Dame in non-conference. But other than that, they dodge Washington, they dodge Oregon. Their toughest opponents are going to be Arizona State and Utah. So they have a very strong chance of winning that division. I think with the transfers, they added Katie Nixon from Colorado, and you had Taj Washington coming over from Memphis. It's a lot of receivers that he has to throw to on top of McCoy and London.
I like Slovis. Like I said, I see flashes, and again, the Pac-12 is wide open. I have a feeling that what's going to happen, he's going to be in that dead zone of USC's not quite good enough to get him there, and his stats aren't going to, you mentioned Lamar Jackson. The reason he held up is because he was doing things that we've never seen. It would take something really in an outlier scenario for me to see that with Slovis. But at 30-1, you're banking on some of those outliers to come to fruition. But that is our second pick. Now we're getting down the card. So is there one guy that's big time odds, probably a long shot that caught your eye?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at long shots, one thing I like to do is take a look at who the running backs are for these really good teams. So if you look at who's won the Heisman as far as non-quarterbacks, you have players like Mark Ingram and Derrick Henry. And unfortunately this year, the running backs on really good teams like Alabama, Oklahoma, Georgia, they're either in timeshares or they're really unsettled situations. Oklahoma, for example, has Kennedy Brooks and they get Eric Gray coming over from Tennessee. I don't know how that shakes out. Ohio State has Trevion Henderson, the 5-star running back freshman, battling Master Teague. I'm not sure how that shakes out. So with those runners kind of out of play for me, I'm going to go to Malik Willis from Liberty. He doesn't check the Power 5 box, and we haven't had a quarterback outside the Power 5 since 1990. So he's already very unlikely to win this award, but he's also 80-1. And what I like about Willis is he does have that Lamar Jackson kind of rushing upside. Last year, he rushed for 944 yards and 14 scores. And then you look at his arm, he's been mocked in the first round of a lot of these early mocks just from his sheer arm potential, a guy that was initially recruited by Auburn. So if he just has one of these crazy seasons, statistically, he could be in the Heisman conversation.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they've got some talent. We saw what they did to your Chanticleers. I don't mind that you're talking about 80-1. I think he's someone, I don't know if this bet is really out there too much, that he's very live to make the ceremony. Like, I think that's the type of guy that I wouldn't be even remotely shocked to see him get there. I just don't know if he can do enough and if Liberty can do enough, as you mentioned, not in that Power 5, but 80-1, I mean, you're just talking a sprinkle there. My guy, also a long shot, I think more realistic, and that's why the odds are cut in half. To 40-1 is Emory Jones, the quarterback from Florida. Kyle Trask is no longer there. It's his show this year. This guy's got some serious rushing ability. That's what I like about him. But certainly a red zone threat as well. I think that's his big out. He has to have a outlier performance on the ground. He needs to take Florida and really lead that offense. They were so, last year it was a tough team. Trask was so prolific. You had Emory Jones. You had talk about a rotation at running back. There were so many guys getting carries there for Florida. I'm hoping that maybe it's a little consolidated this year. Certainly they've lost some big time weapons. Pitts not being there is going to be a downgrade for everyone. But I think that might actually help a guy like Emory Jones because maybe it's more on him to create some of this offense. So 40-1. We know that if Florida makes a serious run, whoever's doing it for them is going to be in the Heisman conversation. I think it's not crazy to think that that's Emory Jones.
No, I agree. They do have a tough schedule. They're going to draw Bama and Georgia. But if they can get out of that with a one-loss season and potentially make the playoff as maybe that final team, I do think he's live. And even if he doesn't have that type of season where he brings Florida to the playoff, like you said, the rushing upside he brings could be that Lamar Jackson sort of X factor that gets him to the Heisman, even if they don't make the playoff.
No doubt. And that's what we're really looking for. Like I said, this is a first look leading up to the season because we've still got some time. We'll probably do a revised version of this, see who the biggest climbers and fallers are. If news breaks, if some of these situations we get more clarity, we'll see if we can jump on some odds. But there we go. We got 3 picks from Matt, 3 picks from me, and we've got plenty more. Like I said, conference breakdowns, power rankings. All of these things are going to be part of the Awesemo college football package this year, and certainly you are going to be seeing us on Saturdays, on Tuesdays for the MAC, on any day that there's college football. We are going to be talking it. So on that note, any final thoughts on the Heisman Trophy first look?
I think we hit it all. Look at your quarterbacks in the Power 5. Make sure they're on winning teams. And if you're going off the board at something like the running back, just make sure they're on those elite teams like your Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram. They all played for Saban. So make sure you're looking at players like that.
Fair enough. Words to live by. But on that note, we're going to bounce on out of here. Thanks for stopping in, everyone. Hit that like button on your way out and stay tuned for more college football videos from Awesemo.com.